Welcome to Preeminent Test Prep. Today I'll be taking you through the reading section of SAT Practice Test 6. I'll be giving you my tips, tricks, advice, and strategies for the SAT reading section as a 1590 SAT scorer. I will also be giving you answer explanations for each question, so I'll tell you why each answer choice is correct, as well as why some answer choices are incorrect. Okay, so as I go through, be sure to pay attention to that. I'll really be trying to give you my best to provide insight into how I take the SAT reading section and how you can get rid of wrong answer choices, find the right answer choice, why correct answer choices are correct, and all of that good stuff. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with question or section 1 or passage 1. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share as well. So we got questions 1 through 10 are based on the following passage. So let's get started with this. The passage is adopted from Daniel Menuenden, Nawabdin Electrician, copyright 2009 by Daniel Menuenden. Another man might have thrown up his hands, but not Nawabdin. His 12 daughters acted as a spur to his genius, and he looked with satisfaction in the mirror each morning at the face of a warrior going out to do battle. Nawab, of course, knew that he must proliferate his sources of revenue. The salary he received from K.K. Haroni for tending the tube well would not even begin to suffice. He set up a little one-room flour mill run by a condemned electric motor, condemned by him. He tried his hand at fish farming in a little pond at the edge of his master's field, but he bought broken radios, fixed them, and resold them. He did not demur even when asked to fix watches, though that enterprise did spectacularly badly, in fact earned him more kicks than kudos, for no watch he took apart ever kept time again. K.K. Haroni rarely went to his farms, but lived mostly in Lahore. Whenever the old man visited, Nawab would place himself night and day at the door, leading from the servants' sitting area into the walled grove of ancient banyan trees where the old farmhouse stood. Grizzled, bent and smudged, Nawab tended the household machinery, the air conditioners, water heaters, refrigerators, and water pumps, like an engineer tending the boilers on a foundering steamer in an Atlantic gale. By his superhuman efforts, he almost managed to maintain K.K. Haroni in the same mechanical cocoon, cooled and bathed and lighted and fed that the landowner enjoyed in Lahore. Haroni, of course, became familiar with this ubiquitous man, who not only accompanied him on his tours of inspection, but morning and night could be found standing on the master bed, rewiring the light fixture in the bathroom, poking at the water heater. Finally, one evening at tea time, gauging the psychological moment, Nawab asked if he might say a word. The landowner, who was cheerfully filing his nails in front of a crackling rosewood fire, told him to go ahead. Sir, as you know, your lands stretch from here to the Indus, and on these lands are fully 17 tube wells, and to tend these 17 tube wells there is but one man, me, your servant. In your service I have earned these gray hairs. Here he bowed his head to show the gray, and now I cannot fulfill my duties as I should. Enough, sir, enough, I beg you. Forgive me my weakness. Better a darkened house and proud hunger within than a disgrace in the light of day. Release me, I ask you, I beg you. The old man, well accustomed to these sorts of speeches, though not usually this florid, filed away at his nails and waited for the breeze to stop. What's the matter, Nawabdin? Matter? Sir, oh, what could be the matter in your service? I've eaten your salt for all my years, but sir, on the bicycle now, with my old legs, and with the many injuries I've received when heavy machinery fell on me, I cannot any longer bicycle about like a bridegroom from farm to farm, as I could when I first had the good fortune to enter your employment. I beg you, sir, let me go. And what's the solution? Asked Haroni, seeing that they had come to the crux. He didn't particularly care one way or the other, except that it touched on his comfort, a matter of great interest to him. Well, sir, if I had a motorcycle, then I could somehow limp along, at least until I train up some younger man. The crops that year had been good. Haroni felt expansive in front of the fire, and so, much to the disgust of the farm managers, Nawab received a brand new motorcycle, a Honda 70. He even managed to extract an allowance for gasoline. The motorcycle increased his status, gave him weight, so that people began calling him uncle and asking his opinions on the world affairs, about which he knew absolutely nothing. He could now range further, doing a much wider business. Best of all, now he could spend every night with his wife, who had begged him to live not on the farm, but near her family in Firoza, where also they could educate at least the two eldest daughters. A long straight road ran from the canal headworks near Firoza all the way to the Indus, through the heart of the K.K. Haroni lands. Nawab would fly down on his road on his new machine, his bags, with bags and cloths hanging from every knob, and braced so that the bike, when he hit a bump, seemed to be flapping numerous small vestigial wings, and with his grinning face, as he rolled up to whichever tube well needed servicing, with his ears almost blown off, he shone with the speed of his arrival. Okay, now that I've read through the passage, I'll go ahead and get into my questions. All right, so we have the main purpose of the first paragraph is to what? All right, well, this is obviously a purpose question asking us to find the purpose of that first paragraph. If we really think about that first paragraph, and we'll go ahead and go there real quick, we see that first paragraph, and I'm going to zoom out a bit so you can see more. Okay, we see our first paragraph. We really touch on him having his life at home with his 12 daughters, but that's only briefly. And then after that, we really spend the rest of that first paragraph touching on all of his money-making ventures, right? Everything that he does to make money, how he's trying to proliferate his sources of revenue. So literally everything that he's doing to try to increase his income is really all of that. So that's really the main purpose of paragraph 1, is to describe his various money-making ventures, all the ways he's trying to earn that income. So 1 is going to be C as far as why A, B, and D are wrong. A, characterize him as a loving father. That's too narrow. It focuses too much on that first part of that paragraph. Okay, that's too narrow. B, outlining the schedule of a typical day. We don't outline his schedule. We only describe his various money-making ventures. D, contrasting Nawab's and Haruni's lifestyle. At that point, we don't even know much about Haruni, so we're definitely not contrasting their lifestyles. All right, question 2, as used in line 16, kicks most nearly means. Anytime I have a most nearly means question, I go to that line, find the word, and try to come up with my own answer choice first. So line 16, it says that the word is kicks. So let's go there. We see that he did not demur even when asked to fix watches, though that enterprise did spectacularly badly. In fact, he earned more kicks than kudos. For no watch he took ever kept time again. Okay, kudos we know as compliments, so kicks would be something like complaints. Okay, he's receiving more complaints than compliments. No watch he took apart ever kept time again. Obviously, he's not doing well at fixing those watches. He's receiving a lot of kicks, which means which means complaints. Right? Kudos means compliments. In this case, kicks would mean complaints. So I'm gonna look for complaints as an answer. I see I have that in B, so B would be my answer for number 2. All right, question 3. The author uses the image of an engineer at sea most likely to do what? Okay, this is really a purpose question asking us what's the purpose of making this comparison to an engineer at sea in lines 23 to 28. So let's go to lines 23 to 28, see what it says, come up with our answer for why the author included it. All right, we see that we have 23 starts down here. We've got grizzled, his peculiar aviator glasses, bent and smudged. Nawab tended the household machinery, the air conditioners, water heaters, refrigerators, and water pumps like an engineer tending the boilers on a foundering steamer in an Atlantic gale. Okay, one thing to know, engineers who are tending the boilers on a foundering steamer. Okay, a steamer is a type of ship, and the boilers are in the boiler room, and the engineers who tend to those, that boiler room is like over 100 degrees. It's super hot, and it's really, really hard work, much like this hard work of the household machinery, tending to all of that, the air conditioners, water heaters, and fridges. So it's really showing the difficulty and physical strain that Nawab endures in his job or in his occupation. Okay, so let's look at our options here. A suggests that Nawab often dreams of having a more exciting profession. No, it's not about him dreaming to be an engineer. A is wrong. B, highlighting the fact that Nawab's primary job is to tend to Haruni's tube wells. No, we're highlighting that physical strain, so we're trying to find an answer choice that has that. C, reinforcing the idea that Nawab has had many different occupations in his life. No, we actually know that Nawab has pretty much worked for Haruni for pretty much all of his life, so that's going to be wrong. D, emphasize how demanding Nawab's work for Haruni is. Yes, right, we're showing how demanding it is. It's demanding like the work of an engineer in a steam or a boiler room. All right, so now we got question 4. Which choice best supports the claim that Nawab performs his duties for Haruni well? Well, that's going to be where we talk about him pretty much working, having superhuman efforts, I believe was the word right here. Okay, it's in the top right of our screen. I'm going to switch to a blue pen so you can see the difference a little bit. By his superhuman efforts, he almost managed to maintain KK Haruni in the same mechanical cocoon, cooled and bathed, lighted and fed that the landowner enjoyed in Lahore. Okay, that's really showing he works very, very hard to keep this landowner, Mr. Haruni, in that same sort of mechanical cocoon or that same sort of high-class living that he enjoys in Lahore, which is his more city home, his more luxurious home. So that was lines, I believe it was 28 to 32, and it was, so that's going to be answer choice A for number 4. So A would be our answer for number 4. That's really showing that he performs those duties well. All right, now we got question 5. In the context of the conversation between Nawab and Haruni, Nawab's comments in lines 43 to 52 serve to do what? This is a purpose question asking us what the purpose of those lines is. So we'll go quick take a look at that, come up with our own answer choice first. So it's lines 43 to 52. We see it starts up here. We have, sir, as you know, your land stretched from here to the Indies. We talk about how there's 17 tube wells. He's the only one servicing them. We talk about how he has earned these gray hairs in his service to Haruni. He bows his head, shows his gray hairs. He talks about how he's getting very old. He talks about how he wants to be released. So really the big thing here is he's talking about how he's gotten these gray hairs in his service, how he's gotten old, but how he's really done a great job being loyal to Haruni over the years. So really focusing in on Haruni's loyalty, or I'm sorry, Nawab's loyalty to Haruni is really what we're focusing on there. So that's going to be answer choice C, emphasizing Nawab's diligence and loyalty to Haruni because he's earned those gray hairs working for Haruni. As far as why A is wrong, flatter Haruni by mentioning how vast his lands are. He's not trying to flatter him. He's trying to show his dedication. B, boasting about how competent and reliable. He's actually saying he's unreliable now because he's gotten old and he's asking to be released. So that's going to be wrong as well. D, notifying Haruni he intends to quit. No, he's asking permission to quit. He doesn't intend to yet. He's asking permission to. So 5 there is going to have to be C. All right, question 6. Nawab uses the word bridegroom mainly to emphasize he's no longer what? All right, this is a words in context question. It said bridegroom was in line 62. I'm going to find that real quick, figure out my answer. So I cannot any longer bicycle about like a bridegroom from farm to farm, as I could when I first had the good fortune to enter your employment. Okay, when he first entered his employment, he was young, okay, and he was able to bike like a bridegroom, but now he's old and he can't bike like a bridegroom. Okay, so this is really showing that he used to be younger. Okay, that's really what we're focusing in on there. Okay, it emphasizes that he's no longer young. So 6D would be our correct answer there. Nothing to do with love or naivety or being busy. It has to do with age. So our answer there is going to be D for number 6. Question 7. It can be reasonably inferred from the passage that Haruni provides Nawab with a motorcycle mainly because what? Well, we know that that's because Haruni enjoys his lavish lifestyle and he wants to maintain that. So it's really a selfish decision to do it. Okay, so that's going to be answer choice B. He sees benefit to himself from giving Nawab a motorcycle. He knows by giving Nawab a motorcycle, he can maintain that luxurious lifestyle because Nawab has always done a good job of maintaining that residence for him. So 7, answer is going to be B there. If we have an evidence question for the next one, that'd be nice because I already know where the evidence would be. Okay, we do have an evidence question, so I'll go ahead and find that. That's going to be where we talk about how he makes decisions selfishly. Right here, okay, he says he didn't particularly care one way or the other, except that it touched on his comfort, a matter of great interest to him. Okay, really focusing in on this part right here, that his greatest interest is in his own comfort. So that's 66 through 68. So that's going to be my evidence there, 66 through 68. Let's see if we have an answer choice for that. And we see that we do. So that's going to be answer choice B for number 8. All right, question 9, and I'm going to switch back to my black pen because it's thinner. The passage states the farm managers react to Nawab receiving a motorcycle with what? Okay, that's disgust. How did I know that so quickly? Well, I actually recall that it said exactly that word, disgust, and I'll go ahead and find that for you. It's up here. We see that we've got right here. So we've got line 70 through 72 is where it starts. The crops had been good that year. Haruni felt expansive in front of the fire, and so much to the disgust of the farm managers. Okay, when we say much to the disgust of the farm managers, that's showing those farm managers are reacting to Nawab receiving that motorcycle with disgust. So since it's literally giving us the word there, we know the answer there has to be disgust. Okay, now we got question 10, last question for this passage. According to the passage, what does Nawab consider the best result of getting the motorcycle? Okay, that's going to be that he can spend more time with his wife. All right, how do we know that? Well, it actually explicitly says that, so we know why A, B, and C are wrong because it explicitly says he can spend more time with his wife. I'll quick show you where that's at as well. That's going to be up here when he says, right here, best of all. Okay, best of all is telling us that that's the most important thing to him. That's what he sees as the best part of getting that motorcycle. He could spend every night with his wife. So that's explicitly saying that the best part of getting that motorcycle is he can now spend every night with his wife. So we know that for 10, him spending time with his wife is going to be the obvious answer there. All right, so with that, we can go ahead and move on to passage 2. All right, let's get started with passage 2. So we've got questions 11 through 21 are based on the following passage and supplementary material. This passage is adopted from Stephen Coleman, Scott Anthony, and David E. Morrison, titled Public Trust in the News, copyright 2009 by Stephen Coleman. The news is a form of public knowledge. Unlike personal or private knowledge, such as the health of one's friends and family, the conduct of a private hobby, a secret liaison, public knowledge increases in value as it is shared by more people. The date of an election and the claims of rival candidates, the causes and consequences of an environmental disaster, a debate about how to frame a particular law, the last reports from a war zone. These are all examples of public knowledge that people are generally expected to know in order to be considered informed citizens. Thus, in contrast to personal or private knowledge, which is generally left to individuals to pursue or ignore, public knowledge is promoted even to those who do not think it matters to them. In short, the circulation of public knowledge, including the news, is generally regarded as a public good which cannot be solely demand-driven. The production, circulation, and reception of public knowledge is a complex process. It is generally accepted that public knowledge should be authoritative, but there is not always common agreement about what the public needs to know, who is best placed to relate and explain it, and how authoritative reputations should be determined and evaluated. Historically, newspapers such as the Times and broadcasters such as the BBC were widely regarded as the trusted shapers of authoritative agendas and conventional wisdom. They embodied the Oxford English Dictionary's definition of authority as the power over or title to influence the opinions of others. As part of the general process of the transformation of authority whereby there has been a reluctance to uncritically accept traditional sources of public knowledge, the demand has been for all authority to make explicit the frames of value which determine their decisions. Centers of news production, as our focus groups show, have not been exempt from this process. Not surprisingly, perhaps some news journalists feel uneasy about this renegotiation of their authority. Okay, now I have a quote. Editors are increasingly casting a glance at the most read lists on their own and other websites to work out which stories matter to readers and viewers. And now the audience, which used to know its place, is being asked to act as a kind of journalistic ombudsman, ruling on our credibility. The result of democratizing access to TV news could be political disengagement by the majority and a dumbing down through a popularity contest of stories. Despite the rhetorical bluster of these statements, they amount to more than straightforward professional defensiveness. And their reference to an audience which used to know its place in conflation between democratization and dumbing down, they are seeking to argue for a particular mode of public knowledge, one which is shaped by experts immune from populist pressures and disseminated to attentive but mainly passive recipients. It is a view of citizenship that closes down opportunities for popular involvement in the making of public knowledge by reinforcing the professional claims of experts. The journalists quoted above are right to feel uneasy, for there is at almost every institutional level in contemporary society skepticism towards the epistemological authority of expert elites. There is a growing feeling, as expressed by several of our focus group participants, that the news media should be informative rather than authoritative. The job of journalists should be to give the news as raw as it is without putting their slant on it, and people should be given sufficient information from which we would be able to form our opinions of our own. At stake here are two distinct conceptions of authority. The journalists we have quoted are resistant to the democratization of news, the supremacy of the clickstream according to which editors raise or lower the profile of stories according to the number of readers clicking on them online, the parody of popular culture with serious news, the demands of some audience members for raw news rather than constructed narratives. Okay, and then I have my table, and now I get into my questions. So let's go and get started with our questions. So the main purpose of the passage is what? Well, anytime I'm asked for my main purpose, I want to think big picture. What's the goal of this passage? And if we really think about the goal of this passage, what we're talking about is a shift from old journalism, which was more authoritative, to now news is perceived as biased, right? And people want different types of news. They want it raw rather than having a spin on it or a narrative. So that would be answer choice B, discussing changes in the perception of the news, right? We're now perceiving it as biased. As a source of public knowledge, right? We want it to be raw now and unbiased, whereas before we preferred it more authoritative, or it was more authoritative. Option A, analyzing the technological developments that affected the production, circulation, and reception of news. We aren't analyzing technological developments, so A is wrong. C, showing how journalists' frame of value influence the production of their news stories. No, that's too narrow. Okay, that's not big picture what the main purpose is. That's too narrow of an answer choice. D, challenging the conventional view that news is a form of public knowledge. We actually agree that it's a form of public knowledge, so D is incorrect. Question 12, according to the passage, which expectation do traditional authorities now face? Well, the expectation that they're now facing is that they have to be transparent about their beliefs and assumptions, right? We talk about how, is our next one evidence? Let's take a look. If it is, I can go find it. Yep, okay, our next one's evidence, so I'll go ahead and show you where that is. So that's where we talk about how we want them to be upfront and explicit about the frames of value which are determining their decisions about what to publish. Okay, so I'm going to look for where that sentence starts. I see that starts right around up here, so I'm going to look for about 33 to 38 here, because I want to include the fact that the demand from the public is for all authority or publishers to make explicit the frames of value which are determining their decisions for what to publish. Okay, so that's 33 to 38 should be my evidence there. I see that that's answer choice C, so for 13 my answer then will be answer choice C. So as far as why A through C are wrong on number 12, I'll go ahead and explain that now. A, they should be uninfluenced by commercial considerations. We never make the argument that they should be uninfluenced by commercial considerations. B, they should be committed to bringing about positive social change. We never make that argument either. We actually argue that now we want full transparency. We don't want them to be committed to any agenda, including positive social change. C, they should be respectful of the difference between public and private knowledge. We're not making that argument either. All right, 13, we already answered that one. That one was just an evidence question. 14, as used in line 24, common most nearly means. Anytime we have a most nearly means question, we're just looking for words in context. So what does the word common mean in context? So what we're going to do in that case is we're going to go up to line 24, find common, and come up with our own answer choice for what it means first. That way we don't get stuck between two. Okay, so common, I believe it said line 24, and I see that that is right here. Okay, so I'm going to box it up so you can see it real quick. All right, and then we'll read from the start of the sentence. It is generally accepted that public knowledge should be authoritative, but there's not always common agreement about what the public needs to know. Okay, in this case, common agreement would be something like shared agreement or widespread agreement. Widespread agreement, okay? Because that agreement, right, or lack thereof agreement, is really being considered as far as the whole population, right? The whole population does not have a shared opinion or a widespread opinion or consensus about this. There's not widespread agreement or shared opinions on this. So I'm looking for shared or widespread as my answer choice there. Let's see if we have either of those. We don't have shared, but we do have widespread, so our answer there is going to be C. We wouldn't describe it as a numerous agreement or familiar agreement or ordinary agreement. We're talking about widespread agreement among a group of people. 15, the authors most likely include the extended quotations in lines 43 to 53 to do what? Well, let's go quick take a look at what those quotations do. We see that they start at the top right side, so I'm going to see what leads into it real quick. We have not surprisingly, perhaps some news journalists feel uneasy about this renegotiation of their authority. Okay, I remember that what came after was that quote from editors and journalists talking about how they don't want this democratization or the audience really to have as much say as they do now or an increased say in the future. So they're really trying to hold on to that authoritativeness. So what we're really doing there is giving a representation of what publishers and editors think about the current trend. Okay, so let's look at our options. We have A, present contradictory examples. We aren't doing so. We're not presenting any contradictory examples, so A is wrong. B, citing representative opinions. Yes, we are citing representative opinions, right? We're talking about the opinions that we have from those publishers and from those editors. As far as criticizing typical viewpoints, we don't make any critique of any typical viewpoints there. As far as D, suggesting viable alternatives, we don't actually come up with any alternatives. We just say we want to maintain that status quo is what those editors are doing. Okay, but the real point of including this, the purpose of including this, is to cite representative opinions from those in the publishing industry. 16, the authors indicate that the public is coming to believe journalists' reports should avoid what? Okay, that's narrative or spin. I'll check if we have evidence for that next one real quick. We do. Okay, so I'm going to look for where we talk about how we don't want narrative or spin. That's where we talk about it being raw. Okay, so I'm going to go find that real quick. I see that that's right here. Okay, there's a growing feeling, so starting in 70, a growing feeling as expressed by several focus group participants, the news media should be informative rather than authoritative, so just giving the facts. The job of journalists should be to give the news as raw as it is without putting their slant on it. People should be given sufficient information from which they can make their own opinions. So evidence for whatever my answer is going to be 70 to 77, because that's where we talk about how we talk about the journalist reports, right? How the public is believing about them, what they think should come. They think that they believe that. Let's just run through our answer choices and I'll find which one's right real quick. So we have A, personal judgments about the events reported. Yes, right? They're saying that those personal judgments from those reporters should not be included in their stories, right? So they're indicating that the public is coming to believe journalist reports should avoid personal judgments about the events reported. Okay, they don't want those personal judgments. And then in lines 70 to 77, we talk about how they don't want personal judgments. They want the news raw. They want it unfiltered. They want it to be just come to them, just the information. They want information, and it's said with no slant. So no slant or no spin, just raw information. So that's showing us they don't want the journalist's personal judgments, right? So 16 there will be A, 17 there will be D. All right, question 18. As used in line 74, raw most nearly means. This is obviously a words in context question. So we'll go to line 74, see what raw says, the context around it, come up with our own answer choice first. I'm going to erase some of this so we can see it better. We see that the job of journalists should be to give the news as raw as it is, without putting their slant on it. So no slant, just the news would mean that we want that news unfiltered. So that would be a good option for raw. Another good option would be give the news as unchanged as it is, but even that one is subpar to unfiltered. Unfiltered would be the best answer if we have that. Unchanged or unedited would be another one. So unchanged or unedited would be two backups if we don't have unfiltered, but I'm guessing we're probably going to have unfiltered because that'd be the best answer choice there. I see we do have unfiltered, so that's going to be answer choice A there. We wouldn't say that they want the news exposed or harsh or inexperienced. They want it unfiltered. They want it unbiased. All right, 19. Based on the table, in which year were the people most trusting of the news media? So let's go take a look at our table, come up with our answer choice there. When were they the most trusting? Okay, we got percentage of respondents seeing news stories as inaccurate or favoring one side. So as far as getting the facts straight, right? If we're talking about them trusting the media, we're going to have a high percentage of people thinking they get the facts straight. We're going to have a low percentage of them thinking that the stories are inaccurate. So we see that that's in 1985 as well. We want high percentage saying they're independent, low percentage saying they're influenced by outside organizations. We see all of that occurs in 1985, so that'll be our answer there. So I believe that that was A, and it is A. So 19 there, our answer is going to be A, because that's the year when they trust them the most. Question 20. Which statement best supported by information presented in the table? Okay, in this case, we kind of got to just go A through D because there's so much information in the table, we're not going to be able to find a trend without direction. So option A says between 1985 and 2011, the proportion of inaccurate news stories rose dramatically. This one we can actually get rid of right away because our table, it was talking about the perception of the audience, right? So it's really the audience opinions. So we can't actually say that the proportion of inaccurate news stories rose dramatically because if we're taking the audience's opinions, that's not going to be objective about inaccurate news stories. That would have to be something that's fact-checked and not based on the opinions of the audience. So A, we know is going to be wrong. B, between 1992 and 2003, the proportion of people who believed news organizations were biased almost doubled. This one we can quick check. People who believe news organizations are biased, that would be saying that they tend to favor one side, would be them thinking they're biased. And what we see, we were asked from 1992 to 2003, which we see as our second column from our left and our third column from our left. And we see we only go from 63 to 66%. So we do not double at all, not even close. It would be impossible to double from 63% because we'd have to go to over 100%. So B will be incorrect there. Option C, between 2003 and 2007, people's views of accuracy, independence, and fairness of news organizations changed very little. Okay, so we'd be really looking for a very, very little change between 2003 and 2007. We see we have small change there, small change there. We have no change here, very, very small change here, and then no change and no change here. So that is accurate. Okay, between 2003 and 2007, there is very, very little change in people's perspective on the news. So C will be our correct answer for 20. And we don't have to consider D because that has to be incorrect since C is correct. The 2011 data in the table best serves as evidence of what? All right, well, the 2011 data in the table, let's go take a look at it. We talked about in our passage about increasing distrust in the news. Let's see if it shows that, because that would be increasing distrust would occur over time, so we'd probably expect to see a peak in distrust in 2011. We see we have them trusting them as getting the facts rates at an all-time low. Them thinking they have inaccurate stories is at an all-time high, so that's really showing that they do not trust the news. Them thinking they're independent, all-time low, also showing they don't trust the news. Them saying that they are influenced by powerful people and organizations, all-time high, which shows that once again they do not trust the news. All-time low in dealing fairly with all sides, showing they do not trust the news. Okay, so people do not trust the news at all. So that's really the trend we see. Let's look at our options here. A, political disengagement by the majority. No, that's not evidence of that. Is it evidence of professional claims of experts? It's not. Is it evidence of skepticism towards the authority of expert elites? Yes. Okay, those expert elites that it's referring to are those high-level journalists and those people working in the media. Okay, and there is skepticism towards them or distrust as shown by the increased distrust in 2011 compared to the other years. So our answer there is going to have to be C for 21. All right, let's go ahead and move on to passage 3. All right, so for passage 3, questions 22 to 32 are based on the following. This passage is adopted from Elsa Youngstead, titled Decoding a Flower's Message, copyright 2012 by Sigma G, the Scientific Research Society. All right, so Texas gourd vines unfurl their large, flared blossoms in the dim hours before sunrise. Until they close at noon, their yellow petals and mild, squashy aroma attracts bees that gather nectar and shuttle pollen from flower to flower. But when you advertise to pollinators, you advertise in an open communication network, says chemical ecologist Ian Baldwin of the Max Planck Institute for Chemical Ecology in Germany. You attract not just the good guys, but you also attract the bad guys. For a Texas gourd plant, striped cucumber beetles are among the very bad guys. They chew up pollen and petals, defecate in the flowers, and transmit the dreaded bacterial wilt disease, an infection that can reduce an entire plant to a heap of collapsed tissue in mere days. In one recent study, Nina Thies and Lynn Adler took on the specific problem of the Texas gourd, how to attract enough pollinators but not too many beetles. The Texas gourd's main pollinators are honeybees and specialized squash bees, which respond to its floral scent. The aroma includes 10 compounds, but the most abundant and the only one that lures squash bees into traps is 1,4-dimethylhexylbenzene. Intuition suggests that more of that aroma should be more appealing to bees. We have this assumption that a really fragrant flower is going to attract a lot of pollinators, says Thies, a chemical ecologist at Elms College in Chicopee, Massachusetts. But she adds that idea hasn't really been tested, and extra scent could well call in more beetles too. To find out, she and Adler planted 168 Texas gourd vines in an Iowa field, and throughout the August flowering season made half the plants more fragrant by tucking dimethylhexylbenzene treated swabs deep inside their flowers. Each treated flower emitted about 45 times more fragrance than a normal one. The other half of the plants got swabs without fragrance. The researchers also wanted to know whether extra beetles would impose a double cost by both damaging flowers and deterring bees, which might not bother to visit and pollinate a flower laden with other insects and their feces. So every half hour throughout the experiment, the team plucked all the beetles off of half the fragrance-enhanced flowers and half the control flowers, allowing bees to respond to the blossoms with and without interference by beetles. Finally, they pollinated by hand half of the female flowers in each of the 4 combinations of fragrance and beetles. Hand-pollinated flowers should develop into fruits with the maximum number of seeds, providing a benchmark to see whether the fragrance-related activities of bees and beetles resulted in reduced pollination. It was very labor-intensive, says Thies. We would be out there at 4 in the morning, 3 in the morning to try and set up before these flowers open. As soon as they did, the team spent the next several hours walking from flower to flower, observing each for 2-minute intervals and writing down everything we saw. What they saw was double the normal number of beetles on fragrance-enhanced blossoms. Pollinators, to their surprise, did not prefer the highly scented flowers. Squash bees were indifferent, and honeybees visited enhanced flowers less often than the normal ones. Thies thinks the bees were repelled not by the fragrance itself, but by that abundance of beetles. The data showed that the more beetles on a flower, the less likely a honeybee was to visit it. That added up to less reproduction for fragrant enhanced flowers. Gourds that developed from those blossoms weighed 9% less and had on average 20 fewer seeds than those from normal flowers. Hand pollination didn't rescue the seed set, indicating that beetles damaged flowers directly regardless of whether they also repelled pollinators. Hand pollination did rescue fruit weight, a hard to interpret result that suggests that lost bee visits did somehow harm fruit development. These new results provide a reason that Texas gourd plants never evolved to produce a stronger scent. If you really ramp up the odor, you don't get more pollinators, but you can really get ripped apart by your enemies, says Rob Raguso, a chemical ecologist at Cornell University who is not involved in the Texas gourd study. All right, so at this point, we can go ahead and get into our questions now that we've read the passage. So question 22, the primary purpose of the passage is to what? Well, this is a big picture question determining the purpose of the passage as a whole. So what's the purpose of the passage as a whole? Well, the purpose of the passage as a whole is to describe the aim, method, and results of an experiment. Okay, this whole passage is really about that experiment dealing with those beetles and those pollinating bees and those Texas gourds. So we describe the aim. So what are we aiming to do with this experiment? We talk about that in the first couple paragraphs. Then we describe our experimental design. Okay, we discuss how our experiment is set up, what we do, the waking up at 3 a.m. to go out there and record the observations of those plants. And then after that, we describe the results, right? The showing that those beetles were attracted to that extra scent, and that even though there was more scent, those increased beetles actually caused the Texas gourds to not survive as much because of how many beetles there were, even though you would expect that more aroma would attract more pollinators. Okay, so the results of the experiment were described in the end. Okay, so that's really what that primary purpose of that passage is, so B will be our answer there. As far as why A, C, and D are wrong, A says discuss the assumptions and reasoning behind a theory. We don't discuss those assumptions and reasoning behind the theory, and if we do, even if we did a little bit, that's not the primary purpose of the passage, right? We want to look at the big picture when we're asked for the purpose of a whole passage. We want to look big picture. C, present and analyze conflicting data about a phenomenon. There is no conflicting data about the phenomenon. C is incorrect. D, show the innovative nature of a procedure in a study. That is not, that's not the big picture here, okay? That is definitely not the big picture. Even if it was true, it would be too narrow, even if it was true. All right, question 23. As presented in the passage, Theis and Adler's research primarily relied on which type of evidence? Okay, well, if we think back to what it said, it talked about how they had to wake up at 3 and 4 in the morning and look at each flower for 2 minutes, and then after looking at the flower for 2 minutes, they had to write down everything that they saw in that flower in that 2-minute period for 168 flowers, I think was the number. It was something like that. It was in the hundreds of flowers. But they're really relying on that direct observation, that writing down of what they see on those flowers. So that was their main evidence that they used there. Okay, they're not using historical data. They're doing an experiment in which they collect data in the present. They're not using expert testimony. Once again, they're conducting that experiment with that direct observation. Also not random sampling. We would expect random sampling more in a social science passage than a science passage like this. 24, which statement about striped cucumber beetles can be most reasonably inferred from the passage? All right, well, if we think about those striped cucumber beetles, what we really think about is how they are attracted to that same compound that those Texas gourds release for those squash bees. So those squash bees and those cucumber beetles are both attracted to that scent that those Texas gourds are giving off. Okay, so D would be our answer there. We strongly suggest that throughout the passage, so that would definitely be what can be inferred from the passage. As far as why A through C are wrong, A says they feed primarily on Texas gourd plants. We never make that claim, so we cannot put that as A. There's no evidence to support that. B, they are less attracted to dimethoxybenzene than honeybees are. We don't say which one is more attracted, so we have to get rid of B as well. That would also be unsupported by the text. C, they experience only minor negative effects as a result of carrying bacterial wilt disease. Once again, we have no evidence to support that, so that could not be our answer. 25. The author indicates that it seems initially plausible that Texas gourd plants could attract more pollinators if they what? Well, that's going to be increasing their floral scent, right? 25 there, answer is going to have to be C. So how did I know that so quickly? Well, we know that in the beginning we talk about how Texas gourd plants, we're confused as to why they don't just increase their floral scent if we know that that attracts pollinators, because if we attract more pollinators, we're going to get more Texas gourd plants, which feeds into fitness and how plants want to produce more, like they want to reproduce at higher rates if they can. So as far as why they can't just increase their floral scent to do that, that's what we go on throughout the passage to talk about. But we have to start that by making that claim. Why don't they just increase their floral scent? So that's the answer for 25. The author does not indicate that it seems initially plausible that the Texas gourd plants could attract more pollinators if they didn't have aromatic flowers, he's saying they actually want more aroma, so that's really a reversed relationship. A has to be wrong. B, targeted insects other than bees. That suggests that they're targeting insects like they would prey, and they're not predators in this case, so B is incorrect. D, emitted more fragrant compounds, or I'm sorry, more varied fragrant compounds. Key part that's wrong with this is varied, okay? He's arguing for them to increase the amount of aroma that they're producing, but he doesn't argue for them to produce a diverse set of fragrances, so that's why D is wrong. All right, 26, as used in line 38, treated most nearly means. Okay, this is a words in context question. We can go to line 38, figure out what it means, and then figure out our own answer choice so we're not swayed between two. So we have each treated flower emitted about 45 times more fragrance than a normal one. Okay, we know this is in context to him talking about how he's putting those fragrances behind those flowers or in those flowers to add that extra scent, right? So he's really altering the flowers. Okay, so another word there would be a changed flower or an altered flower. Those would both be good options. Okay, each changed flower, each altered flower. Altered would be my number 1 choice. Changed would be my number 2 choice. So let's see if we have either of those. I'm guessing we're going to have at least one. We see we do have altered. Okay, we wouldn't say restored because that would imply that something fails and then we fix it up, and that's not what's occurring here. We're not providing the flowers. Okay, we're altering them or treated the flowers. We're not preserving them either. We are changing them. So altered is going to be our answer for 26. 27. What did Theis and Adler do as part of their study that most directly allowed Theis to reason that bees were repelled not by the fragrance itself? Okay, well, what did they do? They took the beetles off. Okay, by taking those beetles off, right, and I think that that's answer choice D, I do believe. Let me take a quick look and read it, and it is answer choice D. They gave bees a chance to choose between beetle-free enhanced and beetle-free normal. Okay, by doing that, they're able to tell if it's the fragrance itself, that increased fragrance that's repelling them, or it's the beetles, because there's no beetles on those beetle-free enhanced flowers. Okay, so that's what's really causing that to be, allowing them to determine that they're not repelled by that fragrance itself. So D is going to have to be our correct answer there. As far as 28, which choice provides that best evidence? Okay, that's going to be, I believe it's right around the middle of the passage. Let me find it real quick. Right here where they talk about taking those beetles off. So every half hour throughout the experiments, the team plucked all the beetles off of half the fragrance-enhanced flowers and half the control, allowing bees to respond to the blossoms with and without interference by beetles. Okay, so that's showing that they're able to determine if it's the beetles or that enhanced fragrance that is causing the variables to change. So answer there, 45 to 50 would be our correct answer. Let's go find that. That's answer choice A for 28. All right, question 29. We've got the primary function of the 7th and 8th paragraphs is to do what? Well, our 7th and 8th paragraphs, we really talk about summarizing our findings, right? We talk right here, we say, let me find where it is. 7th and 8th paragraphs. Let me go down and quick check what lines it said again. Lines 65 to 84. Okay. So I see in line 64, we start talking about how squash bees are indifferent, honeybees visited enhanced flowers left us in the normal ones. So at this point, we're really describing our results. So we start describing our results right around here. And then down here, once again, we get into more of the specifics of our results, right? We have quantitative results, so our specifics of our results. We start diving into quantitative measurements of our results. So really summarizing up our findings. And then in the end here, we answer our driving question saying the new results provided a reason the Texas gourd never evolved to produce a stronger scent. So really summarizing our findings and then applying them. So let's look at our answer choices. We have option A, summarizing their findings. That's perfect. So 29 answer there is going to be A. As far as why B, C, and D are incorrect, describing their hypotheses, no, those last ones are summarizing findings. Hypotheses was found in the beginning. Illustrating their methods, that came before it. That was that experimental design. That was before these lines. D, explaining their reasoning, that was also before those lines. Okay, these lines are focusing on their findings. So 29 is going to be A. 30, in describing squash bees as indifferent, line 68, the author most likely means what? Well, let's go to line 68, figure out our own answer choice first so we're not stuck between two. Okay, so we've got what they saw was double the number of beetles on fragrance-enhanced blossoms. Pollinators did not prefer the highly scented flowers. Squash bees were indifferent. Honeybees visited enhanced flowers less often than normal ones. Okay, so the squash bees being indifferent is contrasted by the honeybees preferring one over the other. So squash bees being indifferent would mean they don't prefer one over the other. Okay, so they're not preferring one over the other. Okay, they are neutral. They don't pick one over the other. They have no indicated preference. So we're going to look for an answer choice that says that. We have option A, could not distinguish between enhanced and normal. We don't say they can't distinguish, so A is wrong. B, visited enhanced and normal at an equal rate. Yes, that's showing they're indifferent or do not have a preference, right? C is wrong because it says they prefer one, and then B is wrong because it says that we're talking there about beetle infested versus beetle free, and we're talking about normal versus enhanced. So D is going to be wrong as well. So 30 is going to have to be answer choice B. All right, question 31. According to the passage, Thies and Adler's research offers an answer to which of the following questions? Well, I just touched on that with my driving question I found at the end there. I'll go ahead and pull that up real quick. The new results provide a reason that the Texas gourd plants never evolved to produce a stronger scent. So this is answering why they don't have an increased aroma to attract pollinators. So we'll look for an answer choice that says that. A, how can Texas gourd plants increase the number of visits they receive from pollinators? No, that's not what we're answering. B, why is there an upper limit on the intensity of the aroma emitted by Texas gourd plants? Yes. Okay, we are answering why they don't produce more aroma in order to increase the amount of pollinators they attract. And the answer is they have an upper limit on that intensity because it attracts beetles, which ultimately decreases the amount of pollinators that they receive. So 31 is going to have to be B. As far as 32, best evidence, that would be what I found before, which was 85 to 86, I believe, right, where I said that it answered my driving question. I see that that's right there, 85 to 86, so that's going to be my evidence for that question. So that's going to be D for 32. All right, so now let's go ahead and move on to passage 4. All right, so let's get started with passage 4. So passage 4 contains two different passages, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to approach it how I would approach it if I were taking the SAT reading section, which means I'm going to read passage 1 first and then answer the questions on passage 1. Then I'm going to read passage 2, answer the questions on passage 2. Then after that, I'm going to answer the questions that apply to both of them. That's how I approach the SAT reading section when there's a two-passage section like this. That's how I recommend you would do it as well. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So we got passage 1 is adopted from Abraham Lincoln, addressed to the young man's Lyceum of Springfield, Illinois, originally delivered in 1838. Passage 2 is from Henry David Thoreau, Resistance to Civil Government, originally published in 1849. Passage 1. Let every American, every lover of liberty, every well-wisher to his posterity swear by the blood of the Revolution never to violate in the least particular the laws of the country, and never to tolerate their violation by others. As the patriots of '76 did to the support of the Declaration of Independence, so to the support of the Constitution and laws, let every American pledge his life, his property, and his sacred honor. Let every man remember that to violate the law is to trample on the blood of his father, and to tear the character of his own, and his children's liberty. Let reverence for the laws be breathed by every American mother to the lisping babe that prattles on her lap. Let it be taught in schools and seminaries and in colleges. Let it be written in primers, spelling books, and in almanacs. Let it be preached from the pulpit, proclaimed in legislative halls, and enforced in the courts of justice. And in short, let it become the political religion of the nation. And let the old and the young, the rich and the poor, the grave and the gay, of all the sexes and tongues, in colors and conditions, sacrifice unceasingly upon its altars. When I so pressingly urge a strict observance of all laws, let me not be understood as saying there are no bad laws, nor that grievances may not arise, for the redress of which no legal provisions have been made. I mean to say no such thing, but I do mean to say that although bad laws, if they exist, should be repealed as soon as possible, still, while they continue in force for the sake of example, they should be religiously observed. So also in unprovided cases, if such arise, let proper legal provisions be made for them with the least possible delay. But till then, let them, if not too intolerable, be borne with. There is no grievance that is a fit object of redress by mob law. In any case that arises, as for instance, the promulgation of abolitionism, one of two positions is necessarily true. That is, the thing is right within itself and therefore deserves the protection of all law and all good citizens, or it is wrong and therefore proper to be prohibited by legal enactments. And in neither case is the interposition of mob law either necessary, justifiable, or excusable. All right, now we go ahead and answer the questions on passage 1. So in passage 1, Lincoln contends that breaking laws has which consequence? Well, Lincoln's really touching when he talks about breaking laws, and I'll go ahead and show you where this is. He's really talking about how it's really, really bad for the nation, right? He says, let every man remember that to violate the law is to trample on the blood of his father and to tear the character of his own and his children's liberty. Okay, he's really talking about how bad it is of a reflection on the nation and how it really tears at the nation's core values. Okay, so that's going to be B. It's undermining and repudiating the nation's values. Okay, he talks about how it's pretty much stomping on the founding fathers' graves, how it's pretty much stomping on your children's liberty, how it's really undermining the nation's values. So B is going to be our answer for 32. As far as why A, C, and D are wrong, A says it slows the repeal of bad laws. He never makes that argument. C, it leads slowly but inexorably to the rule by the mob. Okay, he never says it leads slowly to that rule by mob, so C is incorrect as well. D, it creates divisions between social groups. No, he never makes that argument either. So B is our correct answer for 33. Now we got 34. Which choice provides the best evidence? Well, that's going to be what I just talked about. So that was 9 through 12 is where I just put that, right? Where we really talk about how he's showing that founding values by referring to the nation's founding fathers, talking about how we're trampling on the blood of our founding fathers. So really showing how we're undermining our values if we break those laws. That's 9 through 12 for our evidence there. So A would be our correct answer for 34. All right, 35. As used in line 24, urge most nearly means what? Let's go to line 24, come up with our own answer choice first, because that helps us to not get stuck between two. I find my word is urge. When I so pressingly urge a strict observance of all laws. Okay, he's urging a strict observance of all laws, so he's urging people to follow all laws. Okay, what's another word for that? Another word for that would be advocate. Okay, he's advocating for people to follow the laws. He's also urging, advocating, arguing for people to follow the laws, but advocating is the best answer choice there. So if we have that, that's going to be our best one. We see we do have that, so 35 is going to be answer choice D. He isn't requiring people to obey the laws. He's not stimulating them to or hastening them to. He is advocating for them to, though. So D will be our correct answer for 35. All right, question 36. The sentence in lines 24 to 28, when made, primarily serves which function in passage 1? So this one's really a purpose question. What's the purpose of those lines? Let's go take a quick look. So it's 24 to 28. Okay, I've got, when I so pressingly urge a strict observance of all laws, let me not be understood as saying there are no bad laws, nor that grievances may not arise for the redress of which no legal provisions have been made. Okay, he's really talking about how there are bad laws, and he wants people to understand that he recognizes that. Okay, so he doesn't want to be misunderstood here. That's really what he's trying to do. Is he doesn't want to be misinterpreted as thinking that there's no bad laws, because he acknowledges that there probably are bad laws. Okay, so he's trying to make sure that he's understood correctly. He wants to avoid misinterpretation. So if we look at our answer choices, 36, our best answer choice there is going to be D. He's anticipating and correcting that possible misinterpretation of his argument. He's worried people are going to misinterpret him saying that he wants people to obey laws as him saying that all laws are just or moral. And he's not making that argument. So he's anticipating that misinterpretation and he's correcting it. Okay, as far as A, why that's wrong, he's not anticipating and refuting a counter argument. He's just making sure that he's interpreted correctly. B, identifying and conceding a crucial shortcoming of his argument. He's not identifying a crucial shortcoming. He's just trying to avoid misinterpretation. C, it acknowledges and substantiates a central claim or a central assumption of his argument. It's not doing that either. So C is incorrect as well. So 36, answer there is going to be D. All right, 37. As used in line 32, observed most nearly means what? Let's go to line 32, see what observed most nearly means. All right, I find observed is right here. I'm boxing that up in this black marker here. We've got, if they exist, should be repealed as soon as possible. Still, while they continue in force, for the sake of example, they should be religiously followed. So that's referring to the bad laws right here. Okay, so these bad laws need to be religiously observed or religiously followed. Okay, this is just like observance up here. Okay, right here, it means followed. Okay, that's going to be the most nearly means there. Okay, it should be religiously followed or observed. Okay, that's what that means. There's really no other word that you could really use other than followed there. Maybe practiced, but that's really as close as you could get. But we see we do have followed, so followed would be our answer. If we didn't have followed, I'd look for something like practice. That could be something as well. But followed would be the best answer there, and we see we have that. So 37, our answer there is going to be A. All right, question 38. I see that it refers to passage 2, so now at this point I go back and I read passage 2. Okay, unjust laws exist. Shall we contend to obey them, or shall we endeavor to amend them, and obey them until we have succeeded, or shall we transgress them at once? Men generally, under such a government as this, think that they ought to wait until they have persuaded the majority to alter them. They think that if they should resist, the remedy would be worse than the evil, but it is the fault of the government itself that the remedy is worse than the evil. It makes it worse. Why is it more apt to anticipate and provide for reform? Why does it cherish its wise Why does it not cherish its wise minority? Why does it cry and resist before it is hurt? If the injustice is part of the necessary friction of the machine of government, let it go, let it go. Perchance it will wear smooth, certainly the machine will wear out. If the injustice has a spring or a pulley or a rope or a crank exclusively for itself, then perhaps you may consider whether the remedy will not be worse than the evil. But if it is of such a nature that it requires you to be the agent of injustice to another, then I say break the law. Let your life be a counter friction to stop the machine. What I have to do is to see at any rate that I do not lend myself to the wrong which I condemn. As for adopting the ways which the state has provided for remedying the evil, I know not of such ways. They take too much time and a man's life will be gone. I have other affairs to attend to. I came into the world not chiefly to make this a good place to live in, but to live in it, be it good or bad. A man has not everything to do but something, and because he cannot do everything, it is not necessary that he should do something wrong. I do not hesitate to say that those who call themselves abolitionists should at once effectually withdraw their support, both in person and property, from the government, and not wait until they constitute a majority of one, before they suffer the right to prevail through them. I think that it is enough if they have God on their side without waiting for another one. Moreover, any man more right than his neighbor constitutes a majority of one already. All right, so now we can get into our questions for passage 2. So Thoreau's indicating some unjust aspects of government are what? Okay, that's going to be inevitable, and should be endured. So how do I know that? Well, if I go back up and I'm asked for evidence, so I'm going to need to get evidence for this anyways. That's going to be where we talk about how injustice is a necessary friction of the machine of government, right? This is it right here, so this is in line 58 to 60, or 59. If the injustice is part of the necessary friction of government, so if injustice is basically part of government, it's always going to be there, then let it go, let it go. Okay, so some parts of this injustice needs to just be let go because it's just part of government. Government can't always be just. So that's 58 to 59. That's what I'm looking for as evidence there. I see I have that, so 39 will be my answer, C. Okay, so I've got C for 39. As far as why A through C on 38 are wrong, Thoreau isn't indicating that some unjust aspects of government can be easily fixed. In fact, he acknowledges that they're kind of hard to fix sometimes. B, subtle and must be studied carefully. He actually pretty much doesn't argue for studying them carefully. He argues for disobeying them if you think they're immoral. That's simple. C, self-correcting. He never says that they're self-correcting. He never says that they may be beneficial. So C is wrong as well. All right, 40. The primary purpose of each passage is what? All right, well, we know that each passage is really talking about advancing a view regarding whether individuals should follow all of a country's laws. Okay, each one makes an argument about whether individuals are required morally or legally to follow all of a country's laws. Okay, we know that passage 1 says, that's from Abraham Lincoln, he says you must follow these laws, otherwise you're trampling on your founding fathers' graves essentially and prohibiting liberty, right, your children's liberty. We know passage 2 argues, hey, you should break these countries' laws if they're unjust. So each one picking a view regarding whether individuals should follow a country's laws. As far as why A, B, and D are incorrect, let's go through that. A, make an argument about the difference between legal duties and moral imperatives. Only passage 2 really touches on moral imperatives, so since that's pretty much exclusive to passage 2, that's why A is wrong. B, discussing how laws ought to be enacted and changed in democracy. This one is more so passage 1, and it's also very, very minor part of passage 1 and a minor part of passage 2. So that one's also wrong because we want to talk about primary purpose, not minor things. D, articulate standards by which laws can be evaluated as just or unjust. Really only passage 2 touches on that a little bit, and really neither one really touches on it. So this one's kind of unrelated. So unrelated is why that one's wrong. All right, 41. Based on the passages, Lincoln would most likely describe the behavior Thoreau recommends in lines 64 to 66 as what? Let's go take a look at what those lines say. So 64 to 66, we see that it says, but if it is of such a nature that it requires you to be the agent of injustice to another, then I say break the law. Okay, so Thoreau's saying break the law if it's unjust. How's Lincoln going to react to that? He's going to say, no, don't break the law if it's unjust. Find a way to reform it. Okay, so let's find an option here. Lincoln would most likely describe that behavior as what? We have option A, an excusable reaction. Okay, he doesn't think it's excusable to break law, so A is wrong. B, a rejection of the country's proper forms of remedy. Yes, Lincoln argues that you should go through the proper legislative forms to change the law rather than break it. Okay, so that B is going to be our correct answer there. C, an honorable response to unjust law. He doesn't view it as honorable. He views it as dishonorable. D, a misapplication of a core principle of the Constitution. He doesn't think that it's in the Constitution to break laws. He thinks the Constitution says you should uphold them, so D is also incorrect. Okay, 42, based on the passage, one commonality in Lincoln and Thoreau in their stances toward abolitionism is what? Well, neither one of them really takes on abolitionism as a stance of their own. Okay, neither one is embracing that cause. Okay, but they do both talk about it. Lincoln uses that as an example in his argument, and then Thoreau touches on it, saying that he doesn't have a problem with abolitionists because he views it not necessarily as an unjust law himself, but he agrees that if you view something as an unjust law, that you should go ahead and break it. So that's really Thoreau's argument there. Lincoln and Thoreau, neither one taking that cause as their own. As far as A through C, let's go ahead and cover why those are wrong. A, both authors see the cause as warranting drastic action. Neither one says that it warrants drastic action. Passage 2 maybe a little, but not really, because Thoreau doesn't take it on himself. B, both authors view the cause as central. Neither one uses it as a central part of their argument. Neither one does. Neither author expects the cause to win widespread acceptance. We never really talk about if either passage or either author expects it to have widespread acceptance, so C is incorrect as well. All right, let's go ahead and move to passage 5, last passage in this SAT practice test. All right, let's get going through passage 5 here. So questions 43 through 52 are based on the following. The passage is adopted from Kevin Bullis, What Tech is Next for the Solar Industry, copyright 2013 by MIT Technology Review. Solar panel installations continue to grow quickly, but the solar panel manufacturing industry is in the doldrums because supply far exceeds demand. The poor market may be slowing innovation, but advances continue. Judging by the mood this week at the IEEE, photovoltaics Specialist Conference in Tampa, Florida, people in the industry remain optimistic about its long-term prospects. The technology that surprised almost everyone is conventional crystalline silicon. A few years ago, silicon solar panels cost $4 per watt, and Martin Green, professor at the University of New South Wales and one of the leading silicon solar panel researchers, declared that they'd never go below $1 a watt. Now it's down to something like 50 cents a watt, and there's talk of hitting 36 cents per watt, he says. The U.S. Department of Energy has set a goal of reaching less than $1 per watt, not just for the solar panels, but for complete installed systems by 2020. Green thinks that the solar industry will hit that target even sooner than that. If so, that would bring the direct cost of solar power to 6 cents per kilowatt hour, which is cheaper than the average cost expected for power from new natural gas power plants. All parts of the silicon solar panel industry have been looking for ways to cut costs and improve the power output of solar panels, and that's led to steady cost reductions. Green points to something as mundane as the paste used to screen print some of the features of solar panels. Green's lab built a solar cell in the 1990s that set a record efficiency for silicon solar cells, a record that stands to this day. To achieve that record, he had to use expensive lithography techniques to make fine wires for collecting current from the solar cell. But gradual improvements have made it possible to use screen printing to produce ever finer lines. Recent research suggests that screen printing techniques can produce lines as thin as 30 micrometers, about the width of the lines Green used for his record solar cells, but at cost far lower than his lithography techniques. Meanwhile, researchers at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory have made flexible solar cells on a new type of glass from Corning called willow glass, which is thin and can be rolled up. This type of solar cell they made is the only current challenger to silicon in terms of large-scale production. Thin film, cadmium, telluride, flexible solar cells could lower the cost of installing solar cells, making solar power cheaper. One of Green's former students and colleagues, Juana Zhao, co-founder of solar panel manufacturer China Sunergy, announced this week that he is building a pilot manufacturing line for a two-sided solar cell that can absorb light from both the front and back. The basic idea, which isn't new, is that during some parts of the day, sunlight falls on the land between rows of solar panels in a solar power plant. That light reflects onto the back of those panels and can be harvested to increase the power output. This works particularly well when the solar panels are built on sand, which is highly reflective. Where a one-sided solar panel might generate 340 watts and a two-sided one might generate up to 400 watts. He expects the panels to generate 10 to 20% more electricity over the course of a year. Even longer term, Green is betting on silicon, aiming to take advantage of huge reductions in cost already seen with the technology. He hopes to greatly increase the efficiency of silicon solar panels by combining silicon with one or two other semiconductors, each selected to efficiently convert a part of the solar spectrum that silicon doesn't convert efficiently. Adding one semiconductor could boost efficiencies from the 20 to 25% range to around 40%. Adding another could make efficiencies as high as 50% feasible, which would cut in half the number of solar panels needed for a given installation. The challenge is to produce good connections between these semiconductors, something made challenging by the arrangement of silicon atoms in crystalline silicon. Okay, then I have two graphs, and now we're going to go ahead and get into our questions. So the passage is written from the point of view of what? Well, let's just run through A through D and let's see. We obviously know it's written from the point of view of someone who's really talking about the changes that are going on in the solar industry. Okay, so we're really looking for that. It's kind of tough to tell who exactly is writing it. I would say that's going to be either the perspective, not of a scientist, so I can get rid of B, right? It's not from the scientist. It's really from the perspective of a journalist who's enumerating these changes in a field, okay? They're talking about how solar used to be very expensive and have low power output. Now we are increasing our power output and decreasing our cost, okay? Where it's not from a hobbyist, because a hobbyist wouldn't be writing like this, right? A hobbyist would be using more slang, more casual terms, not explaining as much. He's not explaining necessarily the new capabilities of technology either. We're really talking about those changes in that field, that lowering of cost, increasing of power output. Also, definitely not a consumer writing this. Question 44, as used in line 4, poor most nearly means what? Well, let's go take a look at what it says. So we've got the poor market may be slowing innovation, but advances continue. And I see before that I have because supply far exceeds demand. Okay, if supply far exceeds demand in a market, we would describe that market as poor or as a weak market. Okay, the demand is weak, the market is weak for that product. Okay, so I'm really looking for weak there. That would be my best answer choice if I have that. I see I do have that, right? We would not describe a market as humble. A market cannot be humble. A market can't really be pitiable either. As far as obsolete, the market is not obsolete because there is still demand there. Okay, it's not completely gone. 45, it can be most reasonably inferred from the passage that many people in the solar industry believe what? Okay, well, many people in the solar industry are believing that the cost of these solar panels is too high and their power output is too low, right? They talk about how they need to have cost reductions before this really is viable as an alternative to natural gas and other forms of energy use. So they're really talking about how they need to drop that cost if they want this to really work out. All right, so that's 45. 45, we know our answer there is going to be C. As far as why A, B, and D are wrong, let's quick cover that. Consumers don't understand how solar panels work. We never make that claim. B, two-sided cells have weaknesses not yet discovered. We also never make that claim. D, willow glass is too inefficient to be marketable. Once again, never make that claim. 46, we're asked for evidence. Okay, so that's going to be where we talk about how the cost is too high, right, and power output too low. I see that that's going to be right here. All parts of the silicon solar panel industry have been looking for ways to cut costs and improve power output of solar panels, and that's led to steady cost reductions. So I see that's from 27 to 30, so that's going to be my evidence there. Okay, so with evidence questions, always try to remember where that best evidence is. I see my answer then for 46 is going to be D. All right, question 47. According to the passage, two-sided solar panels will likely raise efficiency by doing what? Well, we talk about how those two-sided solar panels, right, and we're asked for evidence, so I'll go and show you where this is as well. We talk about how those two-sided solar panels will collect that light that reflects off the ground or off that sand it talked about. So right here, okay, the light reflects onto the back of the panels and could be harvested to increase power output, okay? So increasing power output, increasing efficiency by capturing that light. So that's 61 to 62 would be my evidence there. So 61 to 62, so that's going to be B for 48. Okay, as far as what 47 is going to be, they're raising that efficiency by absorbing that reflected light. So 47 there, that's going to be B. Right, we're absorbing that reflected light off the ground. We're not requiring little energy to operate or being reasonably inexpensive to manufacture, and preventing light from reaching the ground. That is not what we're doing. So D is also incorrect. 48 already answered that one. Now we're down to 49. As used in line 69, betting on is most nearly means what? Well, let's go take a look at betting on, come up with what it most nearly means. We know it was line 69. I'll go ahead and make sure I box that term up so you can see it. It's right here. Okay, so we have even longer term. Green is betting on silicon, aiming to take advantage of the huge reductions in cost already seen with the technology. Okay, green betting on silicon here basically means he's counting on silicon or relying on silicon or thinks it's going to be a positive thing, right? He's very, very optimistic about it. So anything like that. So anything where it says he's optimistic about it or he's relying on silicon, counting on silicon, anything like that would be a great option. I see I don't have anything as counting on or relying on silicon, but I do have optimistic about, which is what he is. He's optimistic about it. He is betting on it. He is counting on it, relying on it. He thinks it's going to work. He's not saying switch from it. He's not gambling with it. And he's not dabbling in it either. He's very, very all in with this. He's not dabbling. He's betting on it, right? He's optimistic about it. 50, the last sentence of the passage mainly serves to do what? Let's go take a look at what that sentence is. Come up with our own answer first so we don't get stuck between two. Okay, I have recent research, or I'm sorry, that's the wrong part, right here on the right side. The challenge is to produce good connections between these semiconductors. Okay, a challenge, which means we have an obstacle we're going to have to overcome. Something made challenging by the arrangement of silicon atoms in a crystalline silicone. Okay, we're really describing a challenge that the solar industry still faces, so we're looking for something that describes an obstacle that must be overcome for the industry. So let's go through A through D, see what has that. A, express concerns about the limitation of material, no. B, identify a hurdle that must be overcome, yes, right? We talked about identifying an obstacle or a challenge. We talked about it has to be overcome, that challenge of converting that energy, right? So that challenge we talked about at the end, that is a hurdle that has to be overcome for the solar industry to be improved. So B would be our correct answer for 50. 51, according to figure 1, in 2017, the cost of which of the following fuels is projected to be close to the 2009 average. All right, in figure 2 it says. So 2009 average cost was $120 per megawatt hour. Let's take a look at which one crosses that or is closest to that. I see 120 is going to be right around here, and I see that that's advanced nuclear. So advanced nuclear would be my answer for 51. I see that that's going to be answer choice D. 52, according to figure 2, in what year is the average cost of solar photovoltaic power projected to equal the 2009 cost? Okay, so this is figure 2. We find where that 2009 is going to intersect our projection. We see that that's in year 2020. So answer there is going to be 2020. All right, so that takes us through this section. I have a 90-day SAT prep course that I'm doing. If you want to take a look at that, that'll probably pop up at the end of the screen here pretty soon. Any private SAT tutoring I'm doing will be linked in the description. Any private college admissions consulting I'm doing will be linked in the description. Other SAT prep material is available on our channel, so go check that out. As always, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and have a good day.